Okay, guys, good afternoon. The hardest part of talking in the afternoon, especially after a break, is after 368 years of being colonized by the Spaniards, we still have the siesta mentality. So I bet all of you are still inaantok and all of you are still dozing off a little bit. So there's coffee outside. I hope you took some. So let me talk about myself a little bit, if you'd allow me. I am Noel Abelardo. I'm the co-country director for Transportify, and I started my career in sales long time back. I look young, yes, but I started my career in sales for about 15 years already, and I started doing brokering back in the day. So with the lack of technology in the past, what I was doing was I was purchasing computer peripherals, servers, and routers from China, which, as we know, everything comes from China nowadays. And I was selling it to some parts of Europe or the US. And, I was basically looking through the internet with very limited capacity, sourcing out those suppliers and buying those servers or routers per piece for about 3 US cents. 3 US cents. And I was selling it for $3 in the US. And when I first saw my first paycheck, I had a basic salary, and then I received my commission on an envelope that was in US dollars. I was hooked on sales for the rest of my life. I knew I wanted to be in sales. I knew I'm going to be in sales for a very, very long time. And the way I came about Transportify is there was an opportunity that we're looking for a business development manager. And again, since I was also always a sales guy, I knew I wanted to enter the company. And I remember the day when I was interviewed by our CEO in a co-sharing space, like where all startups would start or would hold office. They're in a small room with 2 people interviewing me. And there was even a point where our CEO asked if I'm good at sales or if I'm really a sales guy. And I nearly stood up and walked out and said, okay, I'm not going to work for you. But at the back of my head, I said, I wanted to prove to you that I'm going to be one of the best sales guys that you're ever going to meet. And 8 months later, I got promoted into the country director role, which I was still very thankful for the opportunity. And a lot of things has changed, and I'm going to talk about the changing logistics or how we change logistics through technology. And my talk would be why there's a need for change. So if you look at the slide that I presented here, these are the 3, we call it the triple bottom line. And these are the major issues that the logistics industry is facing. So we have the economic issue, which according to my research, there's like 5 to 20% burden on GDP for most countries worldwide. And I think in the Philippines, it's over 20%. And then we have issues on environment. Like, we all see how congested Metro Manila is, how a lot of vehicles are producing all those carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, and it's just producing a lot of problems in our environment. And you see that happening, especially on the recent days that the typhoons are getting stronger. The summer becomes rainy, the rainy season becomes hot. So it's just becoming a huge problem, and increasing the vehicles on the road is just adding up to that problem. And then we have the social aspect of the problem also, or social issues, where a lot of people nowadays, especially consumers, they want something fast, they want something reliable, and on top of that, they want everything cheap. So the moment you're faced with that problem, it's very hard to address if you don't have the right tools to solve that issue. So the problem is that I've been seeing and we've been facing is today's logistics systems are typically optimized for yesterday's customers. What do I mean by that? what worked in the past, or what happening in the past, is most of the customers are retail, meaning they go on supermarkets, they go on malls, and all the goods are in one place. It's aggregated, it's fixed, it's known to be just in one place. And the logistics providers or some companies actually work in optimizing their deliveries for that demand or for that factor, wherein, customers would come to malls and get the items that they need. And earlier, Inaj, I think, was talking about the super malls right now, or the malls right now. The biggest malls can accommodate up to 1 million goods at any given time. But with e-commerce, they're able to do it like 29 million goods sold or items that they have. So it's changing. It's becoming more apparent that we just need a solution for all these problems. And these demand points will continue to change in the coming years. So what do we do about it? Like, if you look at the logistics providers now, you have the distribution centers that are fixed, and then those distribution centers are technically in charge of delivering it to your point of sale. But today's demand is varying already. The demand today, the consumer today is ever changing. So these are some of the things that I'm sure a lot of you know about you being a consumer as well, is that you have a lot of varying requests. Most customers would say, I want this, I want that, I want it new, I want it used, I want it everything. And sometimes it's very hard for brands to be able to provide that. And also the fact that a lot of people are now wanting it now, immediate need, or all-time sensitive. And these are becoming problems because I remember back in the day when you buy appliances, right? And I love telling this story. Like when you buy appliances, typically you purchase the item and you want your items delivered. For example, your washing machine to be delivered to your homes. And I'm sure all of you knows this. Like, how long does it take for your washing machine to get to your house? A week? 3 days? 5 days? If you're lucky, if you hit Thursday, you probably get it on a Saturday. And what's the common question that you would ask? What time does it arrive? And what's the common question? The common answer to that? Sir, it'll arrive in the afternoon. And you ask, what time in the afternoon? It's just gonna arrive in the afternoon. So you sit there at your house doing nothing, waiting for your washing machine to arrive. And you've wasted the entire afternoon already waiting for it. And then lo and behold, it doesn't arrive. Right? It won't arrive. And you don't have anyone to scream at because the store is already closed. So you wait, you sleep, and then you wait the next morning and you shout at the customer service for that company. It's not efficient. And that demand is changing. People want their items now. That's why e-commerce in the Philippines, the likes of Lazada and Zalora, is growing. Because consumers are now more demanding. On top of that, the quantities are becoming smaller and smaller. I'm sure Rostans knows this. Or a lot of convenience stores. Like you walk a 1 kilometer street. Can you tell me how many convenience stores you see in a 1 kilometer street? You would see, 7-Eleven, Family Mart, Lawson's, Circle K, All Day Supermart, and all these convenience stores in one street. And what's the challenge of companies supplying to those convenience stores? Their packages become smaller, the quantities become smaller, their drop sizes become smaller. And you can't exactly use your closed van, your 4-wheel closed van, to drive along that one street and deliver to 2 or 3 of them, right? Because it doesn't fill your van. So the moment you go out and with a less than truckload delivery, you're already losing money, correct? So that's becoming a problem. Another is different locations. Customers now want different locations. Let's talk about Uber a little bit. Like, Uber used to be point to point. But because they want to maximize capacity, they're doing ride sharing now, like the Uber pool or Grab share, right? It's cheaper for the riding public, but at the same time, it's maximizing the capacity because you're driving one car. Like if you congest in one street, you congest 70 vehicles. That's just 70 people in that street. If you remove all the vehicles, you can fit over 200 people in that street. So why not maximize that capacity, right? And essentially, on-demand logistics, that's what we're designed to do. We already have the vehicles there. We operate in a marketplace model. You're already driving. Why not utilize what's already with you and put some boxes or make some deliveries out there? You know, earlier this year, we were interviewed at Bloomberg. And one of the things that we always would say is we provide livelihood also for drivers, for that independent contractors, because it's the reason why we got that interview was one of the segment producers of Bloomberg was driving for us. And she was a girl, she actually recommended the interview to RJ, or their producer, because she was very happy. Before she goes to the office, she'd make a delivery. She'd earn 1,500 or 2,000 pesos early morning, and then right after work, she'd make another delivery, going home, earn another 2,000, 2,500. In a day, she was already earning 4,000 pesos, which is not bad. You know, driving just back and forth, and she's delivering somewhere near their office. So, makes sense. So we provide livelihood to all these people as well. And we solve problems for a lot of big companies. And I'm happy to see some of the people here is already trying the on-demand service. And I hope, after this presentation, that a lot of people will be a little bit more open to that. We started in Manila about 2016, last year, July. And initially, what we were helping out SMEs. We were helping out, now it's called MSMEs, or micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Number one, because they have the biggest problems when it comes to their logistics. If you think about it, these SMEs, they don't have capacity to grow their business because they're too worried about their operational logistics deliveries. They are unable to grow their business because one of the clients that I first met, he was delivering fresh produce to restaurants in BGC. And one of the problems that he was facing was his driver was an idiot. Sorry, pardon my French. And you know, the driver that he hired, what he was doing was he was driving in front of the driver, and the driver would follow him to navigate the streets of BGC. How is that scalable? How are you going to fix that without growing, how are you going to solve that problem and grow your business if you can't even rely on your service provider? So when we arrived in this marketplace model, he was so excited. You know, we had a countdown days before we were about to launch in Manila, and he kept calling me every day. Oh, it's just 4 days. Oh, it's just 3 days. Oh, 2 days. Or tomorrow na. He was so excited to try out the service, and he made a booking at 4 o'clock in the morning and woke me up. Because drivers obviously were still asleep, so we had to start waking up drivers for him. But it was a very exciting time because that was the first customer that we really helped out. So, as I mentioned, most companies are struggling today. So I mentioned here, the struggle is real. Companies are challenged to meet the different demands of their customers. Whether it be appliance stores, flower shops, furnitures, big pharmaceutical companies, or big retail companies, they're all challenged with different things by their users, by their customers. And essentially, with technology and a lot of startups, like if you've attended startup events, you'll realize there's a lot of innovation out there. And you just have to be open about all these innovations. Like fintech is now one of the biggest things in Manila. HR is also doing some innovations on their side. Logistics, of course, is being disruptive as well. You know, these are all coming. And Bernard mentioned that, you know, we're an on-demand logistics. We're similar to Lalamove. But there's more coming. And we already know a lot of companies from the US are interested to come to Manila and even in Southeast Asia. So us as a first movers in this market, we want to be able to provide the best customer service. And essentially that's what we want, because as mentioned earlier, the moment you provide great customer service is when you provide loyalty to your customers, correct? Because that's the only way. They keep coming back to you because you provide good service. A lot of speakers earlier this morning and even this afternoon have been talking about operational problems and that prevents or impedes growth. And number one, which we all know too well, is the congestion and traffic in Metro Manila. You know, I think the worst that I've experienced, the traffic that I've experienced is from Green Hills going to EDSA Ortigas. So that's about 1 kilometer. It took me 2.5 hours passing by LaSalle Green Hills. 2.5 hours. Like I dozed off in my Uber. I woke up, I was still there. I was asking the driver, am I on Twilight Zone or something? Because why haven't we moved? And you can imagine companies facing that problem in logistics. How can you deliver your goods? How can you deliver your chocolates? How can you deliver your retail items if there's really no way to go around that street if you have that problem in traffic? And then you're faced with unprofessional drivers. A lot of companies here know there are a lot of those. Like when you rely on certain service providers, like more often than not, the drivers are unreliable, or sometimes even to a point of unprofessional. And that's why in most ride-sharing apps now, they provide comments, right? You provide ratings to your drivers. And it's similar to our app that you can favorite or ban your driver. If you don't want the driver, he'll never accept a booking from your platform again. Or if you like the driver, you can make him as your favorite. So things like that, innovating that type of service. And then mentioned earlier, extreme demand variability. I already talked about that. And then time-sensitive, unreliable customer service. Again, talking about in the past, when you want to complain to someone, it's very hard to reach their number or very hard to reach the correct person. And right now, what apps like us are trying to do is we allow users and the suppliers to talk amongst themselves, to fix their problems themselves without being reliant on customer service. But of course, as a company, your customer service is very important to make sure that you can mediate when there's a big problem happening. And then there's lack of technology. As my example earlier, when you want your items delivered, you can't even track it. And we're providing some type of innovation through not just trace and track, or you could follow your orders, but you could share the location. Essentially, what happens is when you book a delivery, your recipient gets an SMS saying where your delivery is. You don't even have to forward that SMS. It automatically happens. And even without the app, the customer is able to, or your client is able to track their deliveries. What else? We do digital signatures directly on the app. We take photos of the items to ensure that the items that we received and the way it was delivered is in the same condition. So a lot of things, even security of your items. We don't co-load items or co-load goods in the vehicle for security purposes. So a lot of those wonderful things are happening right now. So the change is needed because we need to unlock the underutilized capacity through technology. As mentioned, there's a lot of capacity out there in the market and we're only utilizing it. That's simply what we're doing. We're crowdsourcing. We're utilizing what's in the marketplace. Like each of you would probably own one vehicle. Like I was talking to Sir Ton earlier, and in Singapore, I don't know if you've heard it, but they banned buying new vehicles in 2018, right? Just to decongest their streets. And if you buy one vehicle in Singapore, you pay a certain tax. You buy a second vehicle, you get another tax. I remember when I was young, I used to play on the streets in my village. I couldn't anymore because there's no street in my village anymore. It's like one big parking lot, like all cars everywhere. So it's becoming really, really congested. And the way we do this is we connect businesses to independent contractors. So we have people who have vehicles that they're not being used, or L300s that are sitting in a garage that are not being used, and we can use them. We can enroll them on the platform, and then our customers will be given access to them. And that's essentially how we unlock the underutilized capacity. Okay. So what is on-demand logistics? I mentioned earlier it's basically connecting these two things. And with regard to our customers, we have several customers. If I broke this down, we'll have 30% enterprise clients, 30% SMEs, and 30% logistics companies, and the 10% are the individuals. So you may think, why do we have third-party providers when we're also a service provider or a logistics provider? It's because essentially what we do for companies like LBC, or we can do for companies like LBC, UPS, Air 21, and To Go, is we become supplementary to their deliveries. You know, small quantities, less than truckload deliveries, we can accommodate for them. And essentially, I was asked earlier if we were competing with these companies, and not at all. In fact, we're helping the economy grow by helping out each other. And essentially, that's why we're all here, is just to find a way for our economy to grow by providing solutions to a lot of our logistics problems. And of course, SMEs, we're helping them grow. And if you think about individuals, I used to tell this story too, that lipat bahay or house moving was a big problem back in the day. You couldn't find a reliable service provider when you're doing your house moving. And one of the most common thing that you would do is go outside the street and look at the Meralco post. Anybody remembers that? You go in the street and you look at the Meralco, and there's an ad there, lipat bahay. And you start calling those people. And if not, what else do? You rent a jeepney, right? You rent a jeepney for 500 pesos, and they'll get all your goods and deliver them. So, spot buying is becoming a problem. That's also one of the things we're addressing for the public, for the regular customers. And then, as mentioned, we provide drivers a livelihood. So we're talking about independent contractors. We're talking about small businesses. We're talking to big trucking companies and individual owner-operators. These are all our partners, and where they don't have access to demand, we can provide because of our app. So we can deliver from first to last mile. But to be honest with you, we are a B2B platform, and we focus on mid-mile services. So from your warehouse to your factory, or your warehouse to your point of sale, is where we're best. So what is the benefit of having an on-demand logistics in the Philippines or in the world? Number one is you have access to scale. You're given that access to scale. Right now, in over a year, or a little over a year in the Philippines, we have acquired over 6,000 drivers in our platform, or we have enrolled. Of course, not all of them are active. At any given point, there's a certain number of drivers actively going around Metro Manila driving for us. And we're just going to keep on growing and adding all those vehicles. We can do up to 10 destinations per booking. So, and we can pick up anywhere in Metro Manila and deliver to any point in Luzon, as long as we have drivers willing to do it. right? So you have that access to scale. You're not limited to warehouse, or you're not limited to a distribution center anymore. You can go everywhere. You also have the reduced commitment to granularity. What does that mean? You have no minimum contract requirements. When you go to a third-party provider, one thing that the customers would ask you is, can I get a discount, right? How much is my discount? And what would the service provider say? Give me a minimum volume. What is your minimum volume for the month? What is your minimum volume for the year? And you'd crunch some numbers and provide that discount. There are subscription or retainer fees. Like, okay, I lock you in for 5 years, this is the fixed price. What if for something happens where you needed to increase your price? You can't, because you're locked into that price. You only pay, like for us, you only pay for the bookings that you make. There's really no added cost by enrolling on our platform. In fact, our app is public. It's free. You can download our app now on Google Play or Apple Store, and it's absolutely free. And then we don't surge on fees or bookings for short notice. Like most of the problems right now, I remember last year when Uber and Grab, I think, surged their prices to ridiculous amounts, right? I remember from Ortigas to Makati, I had to pay 800 pesos. And that's a 6-kilometer trip. So it becomes ridiculous. And the moment we start doing that for businesses is we lose businesses. We lose their trust. And that's the reason why we don't do that. Because again, by building our supply chain, by building our marketplace model, we are able to accommodate the ever-changing demand. You also benefited by the fact that your overheads become very variable. So you eliminate two things. One is fleet overhead, because you don't have vehicle capital expenses or financing. You don't need to go to the bank and make a loan to buy a number of vehicles. You don't have to think about repair or maintenance. You don't have to think about a garage or security of your vehicles. Because again, we operate in a marketplace model. We're utilizing what's already existing out there. Second is we eliminate staffing overhead. How do we do that? One of the biggest problems with logistics also is just managing your staff, managing your employees, managing your drivers, managing your helpers, your pahinantes. And with that, we eliminate that because you just use our app and we worry about everything else. You also eliminate staffing through dispatchers. Like you usually, you have a lot of service providers. Like in Jakarta, when we had that, one of the companies in Jakarta that we service, they talked to 100 third-party providers. You could imagine how ridiculous that is when you start having problems with even just 50 of them. You start calling them all the time. So with that, it's centralized with us. You use the app, you can communicate directly to the driver or contact our CS, and it becomes our problem, not yours. So just to give a short compare and contrast about the traditional logistics model versus the on-demand and why we need the on-demand. So I pointed out 4 things: the supply resources, the incentives and controls, the decision making, and even the network. So talking about supply resources, a traditional business model would always have a fixed capacity. Like what I said earlier, the biggest problem of today's traditional logistics is that they're typically optimized to ensure a fixed demand. And so you have that fixed capacity. You're very asset heavy. You probably average out your vehicles for the year. So for example, on your off-peak season or your low-peak season, you buy vehicles to accommodate that need. But what happens if there are surges? What if there's an on-demand or a demand for a certain client? You're unable to fulfill that. because again, you have a fixed capacity. With on-demand logistics, it becomes very asset light. Again, you're adjusting your capacity to fit the demand, not the other way around. Second is when it comes to incentives and controls. You know, the traditional companies would know their supply is already known. They basically match their unknown demand with a set of resources. But when it comes to on-demand logistics, it becomes both supply and demand are flexible. It becomes both variable. So you meet the ever-changing needs of the demand and you create incentives and control for them. So perfect example is we discipline our drivers when they commit offenses. But we also educate a lot our customers on what the limitations of our app can do, what are limitations of our our company can do. And that's very important. With regard to decision making, usually when you're talking to a traditional business logistics company, you talk to a single point person. But when you do on-demand logistics, you're decentralizing that decision-making process because the supply and demand talk to each other. So they decide, you know, when a customer makes a booking, if the driver refuses to accept it, you have no choice. So it's decentralized. And the network is static when it comes to some traditional business models, like the very few to the very many, compared to a very dynamic logistics model wherein many to many, it fits, your many demand would fit the many supply. So that's how I guess some of the difference would be. And why there's a need for change is in the beginning when we were thinking about launching Manila, we were actually surprised by the reception with regard to our type of service with our app. Because I guess people are really now open to exploring new options. Apart from having their fixed assets and all that, you now are relying on technology to provide solutions for your problem. And again, we launched in Thailand first back in 2015. We've been operating in Manila for over a year. Essentially, Transportify wants to be the #1 service provider or logistics service provider for on-demand services in Southeast Asia. And we're going to quickly grow into other emerging markets in Southeast Asia, including Vietnam, Malaysia, Myanmar, and all those wonderful countries. And right now, on our platform, we have enough capacity to meet the ever-growing demand. And we're only hoping that these types of platform can help open up your minds. And I want to thank the organizers, I want to thank the sponsors for giving us that opportunity to showcase what we can do to help you out. Again, we're not competing with anyone. It's more us being a solution to your current existing problem. And give me, you know, I'm here on this table. Anytime you can come and approach me. And I'd like to welcome you all to the revolution. Thank you very much.